Good evening and welcome to the Widdershins yarn. My name is Stevie.
And I'm Lillias.
And I have actually forgotten my entire intro.
Yay!
But welcome to our podcast. Our podcast is a journey into the queer, crooked corners of the mind and an exploration into the horror genre. Yeah.
It's spooky bitches time.
That's it. It's not Mighty Morphin time. It's spooky bitches time. It's where we morph into really sexy, spooky supervillains in really tight-fitting lycra.
Yes.
Right.
There for it.
I can feel it. But, so welcome to our podcast. And tonight's episode, we are looking at the amazing horror enigma of Silent Hill.
Yes.
Intro music. They're
coming to get you, Barbara.
Welcome back. Welcome back. What am I telling you? Welcome back. Welcome back, listeners. I was just serenading Lillias with my own version of the theme tune, which I hope you enjoyed, Lillias.
I loved. It gave me life. It invigorated me. I feel reborn. Thank you.
I'm invigorated. I'm alive. Oh, that's good. I'm glad. I have to say though, for starting off a series on Silent Hill, I don't think we could have picked a better night with the fact it is slashing down with rain, stormy, dark, creepy. So it's the perfect atmosphere.
It's definitely the perfect Silent Hill atmosphere. There's just missing a lot of mist. Like a lot of
It is
fog.
missing a lot of mist. And, the occasional demonic possession. But, you never know. You never know what will happen in the next half hour, so... But, so I'm actually really excited by this topic. Partly because I feel like in terms of my own gamer experience, I have, Pokemon evolved from, scared little Bulbasaur of, horror games into, a relatively capable Venusaur. So,
I'm so very much a Bulbasaur.
Well... Bulbasaur! So,
Not even that, I'm a Magikarp for far.
You are not a Magikarp. Don't sell yourself short. You're not a Magikarp. You're a mighty Gyarados. Sorry, I don't know. What is your experience with gaming and stuff, Lillias? Can I ask?
I don't play that many games, but I grew up watching my friends play games and boyfriends and stuff like that. I really enjoy video games and I enjoy the stories unfolding and all of that kind of stuff. I don't always enjoy the stress that comes from playing them myself. They make me slightly stressful in places, but I really enjoy watching other people play them, and I think Silent Hill is definitely one of those staples of one I've always seen. I've played a bit myself, and just it totally formed a lot of my interests and stuff in the spooky.
Oh, would you say it's been influential?
It's been influential for me.
Oh, that's so exciting! Hold on, I feel like that needs a little fan thwart. Oh no, what have I done with it? I was using it to teach my teenagers earlier.
Yeah.
And that sounds awful. I used my act better. Thorpe. No, but no, that's interesting. In what ways would you say you feel Silent Hill has been influential on you?
I think some of the characters and designs were so iconic, and that whole idea of the kind of abandoned, rundown other and stuff. Me and my friends used to go and do, I think it's called urban exploring, or what's it called? Urban.
Do you mean breaking into shit?
Legally, I do not mean breaking into shit.
I'm joking,
but breaking into shit.
But breaking into shit. Yeah.
So we used to go to abandoned buildings and stuff like that and have an explore and just kind of experience some of that horror thing. So even like today as well, I find myself, if I'm out and about, I'll take photos of like peeling paint and
Yep.
rusty doors and stuff like that. I really love that whole aesthetic that goes along with it.
Yeah, totally.
And just some of the horror moments in that game are perfect. There's bits where you're like looking down a corridor and it's nothing to do with the story of the game at all. It's just you're absolutely terrified of going down that top corridor because there's a hole in the wall and it means you have to walk past that hole, and you know this game by now. And then you walk past and nothing happens, and that's scarier. That is much scarier.
I mean, that's the thing. It's just a complete like psychological mindfuck.
Yeah.
Like from everything to the visual aesthetics, the sound design. I mean, I'm starting to experience like I feel like I'm having almost like a horror game resurgence because I'm also I've recently started playing Resident Evil 7, and I shit you not, like I actually feel like I'm about to poo myself every like minute. There's just me screaming because it's the sound design alone is terrifying. And it's the same sort of thing for Silent Hill because like
The
you know,
sound design on Silent Hill is fabulous.
it's amazing.
Should we briefly talk about the general concept of the Silent Hill?
Yeah, no, definitely. Don't worry. I will get there.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
I feel like I'm rambling. I'm like rah, 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 rah.
Because
But,
that noise when there's a transition into Silent Hill is just
oh mama.
like if that played whilst you were out and about, everything would just stand on it and you'd be like, oh right, nope, this is it.
Yeah,
Now's
no.
my time.
Well, stick a fork in me. I am done. Yeah, like I mean, because I was first introduced to Silent Hill as a teenager. Like I was, I played games and stuff. I wasn't like a massive hardcore gamer, but like. I was more like Final Fantasy and like, Soul Calibur and Onimusha, and like I really enjoyed games where I felt like I was in control in the sense of I was a beautiful glittery maiden that ran around with a massive sword and like stabbed things, and I felt very empowered by it. So I could never really understand how in Silent Hill and horror games, I think in general, it's that kind of letting go of that sense of power and ownership, and giving it over to something which can pretty easily kill you. So like,
Yeah, Silent Hill is the opposite of being in control of the situation.
Yeah, completely. It's just not empowered. Like I wasn't interested in it because I didn't feel empowered by it. But I was fascinated with watching it being played. And I think, now that I feel, as I said, I have evolved into my Venusaur form, I feel more able to kind of like, I guess, tackle Silent Hill more. But yeah, I thought what we'll do is we'll delve into a bit of like the kind of the history of the series a little bit. I just want to say as well that this episode is not going to be massively about like kind of the plots of Silent Hill or particularly spoilery, but in later, because we're going to do a series on Silent Hill, this is the first one, but I think maybe later episodes when we start delving into the lore, it will be a bit more like, this is what goes down. And fuck me, it's scary. But so Silent Hill, the very first game, came out in 1999, which again I didn't realise. I actually thought Silent Hill came out much later than the 90s.
Yeah, I did not realise it was that early.
Yeah, it came out in 1999, and it was essentially Konami, which is the the game developer. It was their answer to Capcom's Resident Evil, because Resi came out before, and I think they were like 3, almost 4 games into their series. 3 games into their series. 2 games? 2 or 3 games into their series by the time that Silent Hill came along, and it was very much intended to kind of combat Resident Evil and the kind of the hold it had on the horror genre for gaming. And needless to say, it kind of blew everything out of the water because of its deeply psychological storylines, its almost, look into like kind of parallel worlds and the state of the mind and, the monsters that lurk within and how that can be physicalized. And it took the world by storm. That it did. What I actually didn't realise is that, because I mean, I knew that Silent Hill was obviously set in America. America. But I didn't actually realise it was, this sounds really stupid, but I didn't actually realise it was set in like a specific part of America. I thought it was just like a random part of America, but it's actually set in Maine, in New England, which is very folklory, and it's steeped in a lot of kind of traditional folklore anyway, which actually, I think, was a lot of the inspiration behind Silent Hill. So, for example, the Native Americans that were based in that area, they talked about Maine and the place where Silent Hill is based on as the place of silent spirits, or the place of silent spirits. And it was this idea that the land of Maine and that area was almost porous, in the sense of when people died, they kind of went into the land, went into the soil, and they were ever present. So it's like, it was this kind of, this strange kind of porous place where like human spirit was kind of interchangeable and mashed together. And there's all this really weird folklore about different creatures being sighted in that area, like things like frickin' El Chupacabra and like all sorts of weird kind of Mothman sort of stuff.
Mothman.
Mothman! Go boy!
Mothman. Anyway.
If you want me off this bridge, go boy.
You're gonna make me.
Yeah, so one of the big things that kind of Silent Hill plays on is this idea that place leaves a stain, or that what happens in a place kind of leaves a mark and leaves a stain and creates almost like its own consciousness. Because the actual place of Silent Hill is almost like an entity in its own right. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like it is like a conscious being, almost like it's alive. And so the developers drew a lot on the history of the area when developing the game, from the perspective of, unfortunately, there was a lot of obviously colonization in the area. The native populations were obviously horrifically wiped out and, treated. It was, that area is host to lots of different battles, be it the Civil War, be it, battles with the British. It's a blood-soaked area, and so they took this idea of this place that has this really dark and twisted history, and they gave it a new face.
Gave it a new face sounds so nice. It sounds like they've done up an old house. They gave it a new face as in they stole it from somebody else, cut it off. It's more like Leatherface.
They just touched it up a bit.
Just touched it up.
Just a little
concealer.
bit. Give it a bit of primer, and, it's wonderful. But yeah, so, they kind of took this idea of this kind of blood-soaked place, and they've kind of then built it into this town, which is, full of black magic, witch executions, and this really weird idea of like realities being dual.
Yeah.
It's odd.
Silent Hill's a little bit like parallel universe laid on top, kind of. So in the game, without going into kind of storyline and stuff like that, Silent Hill kind of happens in two places. You have the town of Silent Hill, and then I can't remember if it's at night or just at a random time or whatever it is, a kind of klaxon sound sort of goes off, and the Silent Hill world kind of crumbles and decays around you, and you're immersed into the big bad Silent Hill, the Silent Hill of the monsters and the demons and Pyramid Head and
Pyramid
the joy.
The joy that is Pyramid Head. Yeah, exactly. And as you say, as as you prompted at the beginning, and I probably should have got to sooner.
Sorry. I don't know if I was skipping or if it was.
No. It totally makes sense. As you're right. Yeah, exactly. Like the very first game, what is the protagonist's name again? I cannot remember what his name is, and I should know what his name is.
There
But
was-
is it Henry? It's Harry. It's Harry. That's it. So Harry ends up after having a car accident in Silent Hill, and he's with his daughter before the accident, and she ends up going missing. And as Harry is kind of exploring the town looking for her, you're right, like the klaxon noise will happen, which is almost like a kind of air raid siren, isn't
Yeah,
it? Which then
quite
starts.
distinctive.
Oh, it's so distinctive. Like, it starts turning the town into this weird, hellish reality. And he's got to deal with it, because they're fucking monsters, and it's terrifying. The emphasis on static is also another aspect of the game, which is really, really important. So, like, very early on in the game, the character finds this radio, which he takes with him, and so whenever anything unholy or monstrous is near, the radio will start. And it always starts as, like, this, like, very faint static to the point where you're not even realising what it is while you're
Yeah.
playing the game, and then eventually it gets bigger and bigger, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, and there's a giant fucking flesh thing trying to give you, like, the Glasgow kiss. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's amazing how much sound can kind of create this sort of really weird reality around. It's terrifying. It's really terrifying. But I'm so looking forward to when we start delving into, like, the lore aspect, because again, I think looking back on the game series now as an adult, I never realised how in-depth the whole series is, you know. With,
Yeah,
like,
I haven't looked into it. I'm learning it all from you firsthand. So I do remember seeing something about it at some point, like a making of or something like that, but I don't remember anything in depth about lore and stuff. The only thing that I can remember from watching that making of was one of the designers for the monsters, who designed one of the monsters as if it was a person wearing a hoodie with their hands in their pockets. And they thought that whole concept, like, of the way that the body was positioned was so cool. And I remember coming across it in the game as well. You come across it in, like, an almost kind of... It's one of the first things I think you come across, and the way, like, it moves its arms and stuff.
Oh!
Just... Yeah, that one.
yeah, sorry, I just realised, I just looked at myself in the camera and I literally, like, loomed out the darkness in happiness, like... Yeah, no, but it's that really weird, like, body horror, like, flailing kind of, it's so creepy. And that's another thing aesthetically about Silent Hill, which is so creepy, is a lot of the creatures are so fleshy and ripply, and
I think
moist.
They're moist. They're very moist. I think they hit that kind of... it's almost like an uncanny valley of... They're quite humanoid. They're very humanoid. They could almost have once been human. But horrific at the same time. And I think, like, psychologically that hits something in us.
Yes.
Whereas when things are a bit more monstery, if you know what I mean, in a chupacabra kind of way, you can kind of, I think, separate that psychologically a little bit more. I don't know, I think for me especially anyway, when something's very humanoid in appearance and it hits that slight uncanny valley,
Well, I mean, not to, like, I guess not to totally, like, totally freak you out, Lil, but some of the stories you've told me about, like, your, like, kind of hypnagogic hallucinations sounds slightly Silent Hill-esque.
oh yeah, they were probably massively influenced by Silent Hill.
Is there any that you would like to share?
One of them, which was near the end of the kind of worst stage of the whole hypnopompic hallucinations episode. I mean, it went on for a lot longer than that, but the really horrifically scary ones, its limbs had been chopped at the knees and the elbows, and it scuttled across the ground on... yeah, no. And I think, looking back now, that was probably massively influenced by games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil as well. Yeah.
And when would this figure appear for you?
I only saw that once, and it scuttled under the bed. I had a dream about it, and I woke up and continued to see it, because that's how my brain worked at that point. Thanks, brain. Fa la 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 la.
Well, better get ready for school.
I mean, to be fair, that was massively one of the reasons I did not go to school very often at that point in my life.
Oh my god!
You know what? I think I need to go and deal with this for a little while.
And did it have distinguishable features, like facial features?
I mean, I could sit and draw it or something like that, but that's, I think, because I had a whole dream about it first. So I remember it very distinctly from the dream. I can't, say that it was massively distinctly when I saw it in my room. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot more vague in that sense. I know that some people do have hypnopompic hallucinations where it is very, very distinct for them, but for me it wasn't very, very distinct. There was always something slightly unreal about it, which I think really, really helped. I'm very glad of that.
Yeah.
But the way I often describe it is, when you close your eyes and the kind of colours that you see when you close your eyes, that kind of slight pulsating red and green, there was always an aspect of that to them.
Right, okay. Yeah.
At some point, I'm going to have to draw it or animate it or something like that. I mean, not specifically that one. I was meaning the red-green pulsating thing to it to kind of find a way to describe it.
I mean, that's, amazing and terrifying all at once. And I feel like you're right. I feel like that is the sort of thing that Silent Hill draws upon, because it really dips into a person's psyche and pulls out these things which are relatable to people, but then at the same, there's this really weird mix of being relatable, but as you say, completely, but also alien. It's terrifying. It's not good.
It's not quite the uncanny valley, but it feels, I don't know if there's a term that describes it, but it feels like that kind of thing. They're just human enough to freak you out.
Well, that's the thing, they're just human enough to also have a consciousness where you know that they are out to get you.
Yeah.
Because Pyramid Head is a massive example of this. Pyramid Head is a being which I believe he first appears in the second game. I'm not sure if he appears in the first. But
I must have started it on the second game then, I think.
He might do. I think. Well, he probably, because I can't remember. There's a game he skips. It's either he appears in the first, doesn't appear in the second, and then reappears in the third, or whatever. But he's this humanoid man with this massive rusted sword, but instead of a head, he's got this pyramidal structure, which you don't know if it's a mask, you don't know if there's something underneath it, you don't know if that's actually his face, and he stalks the protagonist throughout the game. And is weirdly ambiguous sometimes as well in terms of his actual nature or what he's trying to do.
Yeah, I think weirdly Pyramid Head became a favourite character of so many people who loved Silent Hill. And I think because there was that slight ambiguity of what the hell is this? But and also the design was just so cool and stuff. But I remember Pyramid Head being the coolest of the cool, kind of. And in fact, Club Wonka, back in Club Wonka Burlesque days, I remember they did a Pyramid Head act and everything. It was beautiful.
And I was like, I live!
I live!
Yes, Pyramid Head slay!
So good.
Cow. But, he is iconic. He is an iconic figure, an iconic villain. And again, I think when we start delving into the lore of who these figures are, it's just fascinating. I studied anthropology, I studied, I study mythology and folklore and weird phenomena as just a hobby, do you know what I mean? Because I'm that much of a nerd.
And how you say just a hobby, you have a degree.
I have a degree.
It was just a hobby.
It was just a hobby, it's just something I did on the weekends. No. Not really. But, you know, yeah, I mean, it was my degree, it was my life, and it still very much is my life. But, I've completely lost my... Oh, no, that was it. No, because, like, you know, I love anything that has a rich cosmology and a rich lore, and Silent Hill was all of that. The main the main antagonists of most of the series are this cult who are worshipping a deity and are often wanting, like, they practice a form of almost philosophical nihilism, and they want to essentially, I guess, rend reality asunder and birth their deity, or birth versions of their deity. And so there's this really complicated cosmology of, like, reincarnation and different forms of their gods, and, like, as I said, I never realised how rich Silent Hill is in terms of its lore. So I'm looking forward to delving into that. And actually, we're going to have a guest.
Yes!
My friend Shane, who he is a massive horror buff. He is, like, a huge Silent Hill fan. And so we're going to get him on, and I'm just going to, like, prod him with questions and be like, explain!
Yes! I also, just as a total side note, I totally love it when you get somebody to talk about something that they're really passionate about.
Oh, he's massively passionate.
Oh, it's brilliant.
He's like, he literally was like, let me prepare my TED Talk. And I'm like,
yes!
Yes, Shane!
I'm here for it.
Again, work, slay, bitch, raka-cacao. Death drop. Can you tell that I watched a bit of Drag Race before?
I have not watched this episode yet. Do not give any spoilers.
I won't spoil.
Thank you.
I won't spoil, but you'll enjoy it. But I also have lots of thoughts. But yeah. So, what is really interesting, and we touched upon this last episode. You know, because I'm involved in pagan circles, you are involved in pagan circles. You know, we have an interest in this sort of area. And when we were talking about Your Famous Witches, we touched upon this idea of, like, commercialism, and how it's really weird how people can turn a tragedy and, like, make it fun. Like,
fun day out for all the family.
Yeah, well, but you know, it's like how we were talking about how Salem essentially became, like, Witch Disneyland, or, like, Witchtopia.
Witchtopia.
And it's, you know, it's all these kind of, you know, these people going to Salem, selling back to witchcraft practitioners their products and stuff, but essentially using the image of the tragedy as, like, the justification of it. And it just is something that really makes me kind of feel a bit bleh. So, weirdly enough, in a weird twist of fate, when I was talking to Shane about Silent Hill, and, you know, what sort of things I should maybe look at or research for the podcast, he suggested that I look into the real Silent Hill, and I was like, what's the real Silent Hill? And so there's a place in America called Centralia, PA? What is that again in the States? Hold on, bear with.
Sorry.
I love how that...
That just plays
What?
on a loop in my brain sometimes.
Oh no! Okay, so I've oh, this is awful. So it's a town in Pennsylvania, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Someone's put into Google, is Centralia, PA still burning? And I'm like, oh no.
Oh no!
That's really awful. But yeah, so the inspiration for, I don't think it Centralia, Pennsylvania was not the inspiration for the actual game, I don't think, but it was the inspiration for a large part of the film, the very first film that was made, because there were 2 film adaptations of Silent Hill made. First one, it's alright. Second one, fucking dire. And I'm like, and it's got like Kit Harington in it from Game of Thrones, Jon Snow, and
Really?
yeah, but like putting on this really awful American accent and flopping his hair about, and you're just like, bitch, no. But just like, nah. But so apparently, anyway, this town had a horrific and really tragic mine fire, and it damaged the town to the point where people could not live there anymore. You know, they couldn't live there anymore. They had to essentially abandon their homes. They couldn't be there anymore. And, you know, this for a lot of the population, this is their beloved town. But it was used as the inspiration to kind of create the imagery for the film, because it's got like the kind of almost like the kind of mistiness and like the ash falling from the sky and all that kind of stuff. It's very eerie, and it, again, yeah, as a location, if I was a location scout, I would understand why it was used. But the town inhabitants are obviously devastated that this was their home, and it became this kind of really weird tourist spot where basically all these fans of the film and the TV series and the game basically flooded this town and like graffiti parts of it, like taking pictures of it. There have been reports of like people finding like carcasses of what appears to be like sacrifices of animals.
Oh God, no. Ugh.
Yeah, so people have gone there and gone, oh, this is the place that Silent Hill was based on. Let's, like, do a fucking blood sacrifice. And,
Why?
like...
Stop it.
Well... No, child. Stop it.
Get
You
better hobbies.
Simmer down, child. Learn some respect. So hold on, so I found an article. I know, honestly. And so obviously the residents are really, really upset about this, understandably. So here we go. I found this article about it. I'm going to read a little bit for a second.
Okay.
While the underground coal fire that left residents exposed to lethal carbon monoxide poisoning and other hazards that forced them to abandon their homes, the fire should have never reached the town in the first place. But caught in the dilapidated grips of the bureaucratic monster known as the Reagan administration, any attempts to salvage the town were underfunded and mismanaged. As a person who is being interviewed, called Fife, apparently says, or succinctly sums up, the town of Centralia was simply not politically nor economically valuable enough to get a fire put out, which to me sounds more horrifying than any multi-dimensional purgatory. So, you know, this is a town which has obviously suffered not only physical devastation, but there's also the political aspect of it, given the fact that apparently this event happened within the Reagan administration, so it was abandoned and left, which actually would have put it in, what, the 80s? If it was Reagan?
Yeah, I'm not very good at my American history. But yeah, sure, okay.
Okay!
Alright, I'll take your word for it.
But, like, actually, you know what? Perhaps then, if it was in the 80s, then it would make sense that maybe the game was also influenced by the town as well, potentially. That would make sense. Sorry.
I think there's quite a lot of, I think they're called like ghost towns or something. In America, there's quite a few of them, which have been towns that have been abandoned for whatever reason. Some of them are really old from the gold rush and stuff, like entire towns that were built up specifically for the gold rush, and then as that faded away and collapsed, the towns served no purpose anymore. They were at a spot which was specifically good for people trying to sieve for gold and all this kind of stuff, and and as a result just kind of had no purpose afterwards, and everyone moved away. And there's
That's
quite a
crazy.
few. So, I mean, America's a massive country, so you know, there's gonna be a few. So there's my fact for the day. America big. Okay, Lillias out.
Mic drop. But you're right. Like, I don't know. It's this kind of weird place where loss and hope and all these sorts of things are, you know, just come to die, really. And it's interesting how, again, someone else's tragedy becomes someone else's profit and someone else's attraction and someone else's thing. And
I think though sometimes people are kind of drawn to sites like that they want to go to the places where there was tragedy and stuff, in the same that people want to visit Chernobyl and places like that, where, you know, obviously
Yeah.
horrific tragedy, and you can't really just go for a tourist little day out. But it fascinates a lot of people, and a lot of people want to go to witness it.
And I guess to pay their respects, I guess, as well, you know.
I mean, you could possibly even say the same of like the concentration camps and stuff as well. Obviously, these are on a huge scale.
Yeah,
but
totally.
I did visit concentration camps when I was in Germany, and it's a very weird experience.
When were you in Germany?
I've been twice. It's I like Germany. Went to.
I don't know why I sound offended that I didn't know. I'm like, excuse me.
I might have been 3 times. I can't remember. I went a few times. It was great.
When did you go to Germany?
So me and my family, me, my mum, Ian, and my brother as well. Actually, that time we drove across Germany in a van, and we just kind of stopped at bed and breakfasts and stuff along the way, and hostels and things, until we got to Berlin. And my uncle and aunt and little cousin, I mean, she was little at the time, she's now a full-grown lady, we stayed with them for maybe like a week, and then we drove back.
Yeah, because you've got family in Germany, don't you?
Yeah.
That makes sense. I forgot about that.
And I think it was whilst I was there with my family that we went to. I also went there in a kind of exchange as well, like through family. It was a friend of their family kind of thing, and we did a sort of exchange programming type thing. But whilst I was there with my mum, we went to go and see concentration camps and stuff, and it's odd. Like I love Berlin as a city. It's a fabulous place, and the people are absolutely amazing. But there's a weird air sometimes, because you're walking down the street and you're noticing a building, and suddenly you realise that you're noticing it because there's bullet holes in it, in the stone, and it's so rich in history that. And I think they've done the right thing in that there's lots of plaques everywhere, with people's names of where they lived when they were killed, all this kind of stuff, and they don't plaster over the bullet holes, and there's lots of monuments everywhere in memory and stuff, and I think that's the right way to go about it, instead of trying to pave it over and pretend it didn't happen. But it's an interesting thing that, these horrific sites have become basically tourist attractions.
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone was very respectful and stuff, which is good.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, when these places become almost like a locus of this place of pain, or that's been through this awful transition, then actually it attracts people. It's an odd experience, I think.
But I guess the problem with this town in America, though, is that it's not being visited with respect. It's being visited with fun, and this is a cool place, rather than this is where something happened.
It's really not nice. Like, the article ends, this last wee bit, let's see. Not only have these townsfolk been displaced from their homes before seeing their tragedy transformed into the joy of a bunch of misinformed Silent Hill fans, but they can't even claim any relation to the original Konami video games beloved by so many. Instead, they're left with a B-movie riding on the coattails of the horror franchise's success. Meanwhile, Fife points out that if you go by the original intent of the Japanese games, trying to pin down the longitude and latitude of Silent Hill is pointless. It's not supposed to feel like a real place, as is evident by the story of the real town only marginally touched by the demonic village's tendrils. The real Silent Hill could be anywhere, anything. Whatever form it has evolves in response to different tragedies. It is tragedy.
I think as well with Silent Hill, it's like the town is kind of meant to look like your typical suburban American, almost white picket fence town. It's not really. I didn't get the impression that it was meant to be somewhere specific.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah,
it's thing of it could happen anywhere.
It's nondescript. Yeah, totally nondescript, and yet behind it there's all this dark, weird goings on. which I so can't wait to delve into because it's so good. And I don't know why I never realised the lore was so intricate, but I can't wait just to like prod Shane and be like, go! And he's going to be like, blah! So,
Yes! So is that next episode?
Yeah, that'll be next
In 2
episode.
weeks.
In 2 weeks'
In
time.
2 weeks. I'm excited.
I'm super excited, so I'm really looking forward to kind of getting his opinion and getting his kind of, his take on everything. Yay!
Yeah! A little walk down Silent Hill's memory lane.
It is, and hopefully none of us are going to get nibbled on by some demonic creature.
Indeed.
But
and let us know if you've played the game, or
yes.
if you're a huge big Silent Hill buff. Drop us your favourite fact, and if you've never played the game and never heard of it, give us a shout and let us know if it's something that you'd now consider playing, because it's real good.
It's real good, and like especially because you can pick up like the HD collections of the second and third game for either Xbox 360 or PS3 pretty cheap. So if you've still got, and obviously we're on like much later generation consoles, but people still sometimes have these things. So me too, I still have them. So you can, if you do have these consoles, you can actually pick up the games for relatively cheap, and the HD versions are really good, so I would recommend. But yeah, I guess that's us signing off. Thank you very much for listening tonight, and we will see you next week.
Oh my god, Stevie, what was that sound?
What?
It's becoming Silent Hill. Oh no!
But I'm so tender and young.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're coming to get us, Barbara.
Bye.
Bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. Wow, 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 wow. Sorry.